I'm gonna sort of just kick straight into this, I think. So one of it's always really interesting with agencies that have co-founders. I've got to the point where it's actually quite rare for people, especially when you have an agency with like 3 or 4 co-founders. It's quite rare for them to be for everything to be okay. You know, there's normally some grumbles and some friction, and I think I always remember Dan, who I'll introduce in a second, telling me that he had this mystical coach called Martin, who came in and untangled the wires between all the co-founders, and it was a really interesting story. So I thought we'd get them together to kind of share a bit of that. So Dan Moore started I think he can tell as well, but the original business was Studio Output, very famous branding firm, and that still runs today. Dan now spends his time on Found, which is a creative studio. And we've also got Martin Palethorpe, who's a leadership coach. And quite a few people I know have done his Quality of Mind course, which he's really kind of very highly spoken of. So what we're going to do, I'm going to sort of kick these guys off a little bit, but then I'll let them kind of lead it, because what we're going to talk about is if you've got co-founders, if you've got multiple leaders, how can having a coach help you like unpick things? And they say you can't read the label from inside the bottle, and I think hearing their story will bring this to life for you. So if you have any questions in your head, do feel free to jump in at any point. But Dan, can we start with you? And thanks for doing this, guys. Could we start with you, Dan? So could you paint a picture of before you met Martin? What was the situation like before you got Martin as a coach? Because you had 2 other co-founders, so there's 3 of you running the business. What was the just paint us a picture of what it was like.
Yeah, so, well, look, first up, afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming along. I hope you find this useful. So, as Ian said, there's myself, Ian, and Rob, 3 co-founders. We met in Nottingham in the 99, 2000. We were, me and Rob were in graphic design. Ian was a client, kind of running club nights. That was how it started, really. So we set up our first business in 2002 when we were in our mid-20s, because it just seemed like the easiest thing to do. The kind of ignorance of youth and all that. And then I think about, what would it have been? Because we were talking about this the other day, Martin, weren't we? Martin and I spoke about this time 5 years ago. And that was off the back of you recommending Martin, actually, Ian, because he'd spoken at one of your events. And obviously, we know each other, Ian. I think we came to the first event. So it kind of started there, really. But probably about 6 years ago, my son was a baby, and I'd got, I think, an ex-client of ours was training to be a coach. And so I did a few sessions with her as she needed people to practice on. And it really opened my eyes to like, okay, well, this has got to be a good thing for me as a person. And I think for us as a business. And as Ian alluded to, we were, I'd moved off the tools, off of designing and off of clients probably the year before that to focus on running the business. But we had 3 or 4 different businesses that were, in any one month, one was making money, one was kind of killing the others. And it was all a bit of a mess, really. And I think we all knew, as in the 3 of us, that it wasn't really working and that we needed some help. I think we might have worked with some other non-execs before that. And I think having done this initial bit of coaching, I realised that this was a very different way of working to a non-exec. And I found it sort of challenging and rewarding in equal parts. And yeah, that's how our paths crossed.
But when you say you sort of all realised it wasn't working, what were some of the symptoms?
Oh, I think most board meetings turning into some kind of low-level argument. kind of, you sort of arguing a toss about things, things not getting done, things not being said, undercurrents, people going off in different directions, or those kind of things where I think almost sort of so many things that had been left unsaid and undealt with over the years, it had become kind of habits, but not healthy habits, and sort of built up kind of resentment, I think, to be quite honest. Yeah.
Can I add to that as well, Dan? I'm just, if I may, just dialogue in as well. That would be great. Hello, everyone. Hi. The other thing that I think we saw quite a bit, Dan, was overlapping roles between the founders. So a lack of clarity in who was doing what and who was owning what. And I think that some of the businesses were struggling. So there was a general feeling of just being exhausted with running the business. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think, thinking back to those days, it was, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, you go from one set of spilling plates to another, and you're just like, okay, well, when's it going to end? And I think, and I think it's something we talked about the other day, Martin, right? There wasn't a set up a strategic approach to alignment. A lot of these businesses and things we were doing, it just sort of happened organically. And I don't think we really understood why until we got into work with you, Martin, right? And then started to kind of uncover that and start to, I suppose, learn to be more open with each other.
Well, so how does it, so you had a bit of coaching, Dan, yourself, and you thought, oh, maybe this could help us. What did the rest of the team think? Was there any resistance to the idea of having a coach?
No, there wasn't actually, because I think I don't explicitly know if either of them have had types of therapy before. I think they might have done. No, they were open to it, but I think we were kind of open to anything that might help us. It wasn't quite desperation, but it was like, look, let's meet people. So I think we met several different people with different approaches, and liked the challenge that we felt Martin would bring. And that's
what did you like about Martin?
Well, we talked about this the other day, Martin. You were straight into questions, and straight into probing, and straight into making me think. And I think the other thing that I liked is that it didn't feel like a out of the box productized solution, which I had from some people I met. I just thought, I don't want someone who's going to be like, I've got you, I'm going to put you in this box, I'm thinking this and that. It was like, I think I knew that we needed something more sort of fundamental and deeper. I didn't know what it was, but just something felt right and a bit different. And actually, funny enough, the person who I'd been doing this coaching with before, she came back with a very sort of detailed sort of set of slides and stuff like that. And I was like, no, this just doesn't feel right. This feels too cold. It feels like we need to kind of, this is more fundamental than just kind of, some strategy charts. It was like, I need to not see all that crap. This feels like it needed more of a, I don't know. It was weird. I didn't know what I didn't want until I saw it. Sarah, I see you nodding there, kind of smiling, sort of, kind of interestedly. It's like, it just, the first couple of times I met Mark, I was like, this feels really different and kind of scary and exciting, and just, and felt like it would change us rather than kind of, I'm learning some new bloody way of operating or whatever.
So you're 15 years in, 16 years into the business. It's going well, and you've actually got a few different businesses. Three of you, and you're starting to sort of see a few cracks. Not board meetings just turning into sort of like little lower level arguments. There's a lot unsaid. So you get Martin in. You look at a few different coaches. You think Martin's the best person. What I don't know if Martin, you want to take this or Dan, but what does that work look like? Are you sort of like naked on a mountaintop with like taking ayahuasca, or like what is it?
He promised that, and it never happened. Martin, I'll let you take this one.
What does it look like? This was 5 years ago. So what it looks like, as I recall it, but also think now as to, is understanding what the situation is. So it's about spending time with each of the founders one-to-one to really get to know and understand them personally and gain trust and respect. It's about understanding each person's needs and challenges. And then it's about collectively understanding how the team feels about how the team is working. So a collective conversation to say what's great and what's not great, and to create an environment where they start to together have a conversation that they've not had before, where they start to see, they start to together identify the issues, agree them. And then it's about, and this isn't just about me selling myself, is like any coach should be then saying, well, here's a solution that I think can help. And our approach to that is to take people off site for 3 days, to really explore, we call it the Quality of Mind program, but it's a deep exploration of learning about how we're each thinking. Because really what we had with Dan, Ian and Rob is just tiredness, overwhelm, stress, judgment, frustration, worry about what's speaking up, etc., etc. And there needs to be some off-site process that isn't just one intervention, really needs to be interventions over at least a year to pull the team out of the busyness of the hamster wheel, to facilitate them seeing some things differently, reflecting and developing an ability to talk really openly together. And then once a team is really able to talk, then they can sort out any of the issues that are actually going on. Without an amazing quality of conversation that's available, we end up with all sorts of things that are not addressed, and they're sort of under the carpet.
Does it? It must take a bit of bravery to do that. I mean, first of all, to go away for 3 days and be together for those 3 days. But what are some of the difficult parts of this?
It's funny, and even as you were saying it, Martin, I remembered thinking 3 days. How can we afford the time out of the office, the money, the this and the that? But I think we all realised we had to place our trust, or we wanted to place our trust in doing this, and so I think there was that side of things, and I suppose I can't remember, but maybe I felt some pressure of kind of bringing this to the business, but we all signed up for it. And that was interesting, just hearing you play that back there, Martin, is ultimately that's the victory, isn't it? To be able to have a conversation, which sounds almost glib in its simplicity, but it's so powerful.
Yes, and I really would emphasize this, and I'm sure people listening would be able to relate to this, but in a team, there's so much complexity around communication and conversation. There's really listening to each other. There's actually listening deeply to what's being said. There's feeling understood, feeling heard. But there's all sorts of dynamics that show up in if I say the truth, are they going to get upset? If I say the truth, might it be taken the wrong way? There's all sorts of dynamics that play out that make communication, whilst it's extremely simple, make it extremely complex to master the art in a team.
Is it complex because like habits and behaviors that other people have gone unsaid for so long, it's difficult to now bring it up, or what's some things that are hard?
Yeah, that's one. So let's say Dan and I were in a team, and I've seen Dan react a certain way before, so I learned not to speak up because I saw him get emotional last time, would be one example. But there's also deeper stuff, which is, you know, in my childhood, I had a strong dad who told me not to speak up at certain points or shut me down. So I'm bringing with it some conditioning from the past that means I've learned from childhood not to say what I really think. And we've got to work through all of that and release all of that to actually be effective in running a business together.
So it sounds like you go quite, are you getting into like where you breastfed by, you know, that kind of stuff? Or?
No, I think the fascinating thing, I think back to the first day of the retreat, you know, the retreat, and you know, well, I was nervous, I was maybe skeptical, but kind of excited as well. We had this little place in the middle of nowhere in Hampshire, like just surrounded by fields, and we were staying near there, and that was where we did all the activity for these 3 days. So as Martin said, we would do group sessions, then one of us would go and have a walk around this field for an hour with Martin and do certain things. And it was, you know, we didn't know what we were doing day by day, hour by hour. So the whole thing was like a bit of a crazy adventure. But I think the interesting thing with it, just as you're saying, Martin, was really the first work that we did was around just understanding that all of this stuff is kind of, they're thoughts that we're having, and they're all thoughts that are layering up, and that's what's holding us back, is the thinking about what this person might be thinking, and that and that and that. And a lot of it, particularly the first couple of days, was understand, well, you need to kind of clear that fog, and be able to get to a place where, I think particularly for us, I probably mean particularly me, to be able to listen without judgment. I think that was something I was very sort of bad at, was being very judgmental in, you know, how I thought someone was going to turn up or whatever. And, you know, once we started to have those conversations where we are just listening, and we're having better quality conversations, and we're understanding, you know, certain techniques we went through, Martin, wasn't there, around, you know, how to kind of have more compassionate conversations and listen and understand, but also to be able to share our viewpoints, but in a kind of practical and constructive way, where emotions kept down and things like that. So it's almost sort of developing the skills to then be able to have better quality conversations. And the better quality those conversations are, the easier they become, the more you have them, the more things untangle, which sounds easy. I mean, it's taken a few years, but I suppose that's my sort of reflection on how this work, which, you know, and this is why I was saying it's so different to other things, that the other people's approaches that I'd spoken about, where it felt much more, well, this is a tool to deal with X, Y, Z in the boardroom. This was more sort of fundamental to kind of unlocking how we work with each other. And I think, to go back to the founders thing, it was, you know, we were 3 mates who met in our early 20s who went clubbing together. It wasn't, you know, it's kind of not necessarily the best sort of place to find your business partners of 15 years. And we didn't, but also I think because of that connection over those years and what we've been through, you know, I think even at the darkest times, we all knew that we owed each other the kind of effort to make something work, if you see what I mean, rather than just go, right, fuck this, I'm walking off.
Just to build on that, Dan. So one of the things I see quite a lot of with co-founders is they got together because they're mates or friends. And that's brilliant because it brings loyalty and commitment. We work together for a really long time, so we stick together, we're loyal, but it doesn't mean the quality of the conversation is great, because you could be worried about hurting someone even more if they're your friend. So you could develop all sorts, and you can, you know, have all sorts of habits with friends that aren't particularly helpful in running a business. And I think that might have been the case here a little bit.
So you go into this, you go into your cabin in the woods or in Hampshire for 3 days, and you don't really know what's going to happen. And Martin's guiding you through this. Like, as you're having these, I imagine, conversations for the first time, and you're turning over rocks. What could you share any of the things that you found that surprised you?
Well, I think, and to be honest, it wasn't really until, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, Mike, probably day 3 that we were actually talking about some of the issues, right? I think the first day or two was really just kind of exploring, how thoughts work and that kind of stuff, which sounds a bit, but, that almost kind of unlocked us so that, we could then have this better quality conversation on the last day. And the last day, I think, I mean, it's a long time ago. I think one of the things that came out was that one of the guys didn't want to be in the 2 main businesses. I think, would that have come out on the retreat, Martin, or was that one of the follow-ups?
Yeah.
And I think that feels like the main thing that came out. And I suppose the other thing that came out alongside that was that the other 2, me and Rob, were like, well, that's okay. And that was like a sort of, almost a biblical breakthrough in itself, that, oh, you can say this, and we'll go, yeah, we kind of know this. That's all right. Which, again, sounds, I don't want to sort of trivialize it, but I imagine you're all here because you've kind of got similar situations or have had in the past, and it's, as Martin said, if you don't know how to have those conversations, they just become harder and harder, and they become bigger elephants in the room. So it was those sort of things that started the breakthroughs. And then I suppose over time, because we did another 2 one-day sessions at the same place as follow-ups, Martin, didn't we? Maybe like 3 months and then 6 months later, I seem to sort of recall. And those were the sort of key moments in terms of, I think by the time we got to the end of the second one, Ian, we were, it was like, right, okay, so Ian's gonna, well, he'd already left one of the businesses by then. This we're going to set up, he's going to set up a new one that's a different kind of thing with our blessing. It's a kind of sweat equity thing. He's not going to be involved in the day-to-day. And it was quite, they were big decisions, but really they were made across 2 days of really good quality conversations. Yeah.
I'm just gonna pause the resume the recording. So see, it sounds like you got quite fundamental. You challenged some fundamental things that you wouldn't have, had a conversation on the way to a pitch or whatever. You wouldn't have had to step back and done that. What was the situation after? Just talk to us about like how it was after doing this work.
I mean, to be honest, I remember after the retreat, the immediate aftermath was feeling quite almost disconnected from reality, because we'd been in such an intense kind of 4-person environment, kind of really, really sort of intensely talking about different things, that it was, but also I remember just going into, like situations in work, like a staff meeting where I'd have been sat there kind of internally grumbling away, thinking, oh, this person's not contributing, blah, 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 kind of playing my sort of grumpy monologue and feeling quite detached from that and not being so judgmental. And I think that was a big thing, to kind of almost being more of an observer on things. And I think that was the first thing to sort of take away from it. And I think also knowing that, like, this feels like the start of something, as in, things are going to change now. Not necessarily that we've got this big roadmap and plan. It wasn't really about that. It was more like we've kind of started to kind of get the tools to, enable me and Rob and Ian to kind of work out what we do next, which is, I think, particularly for me, mine was almost sort of the antithesis of how I used to work, right? With everything having a plan and a spreadsheet and a timeline and a this and a that and a plan B and a plan C. And it was like, well, hang on, you don't need that. You can have a kind of a direction, but letting things happen a lot more was something that I learned a lot to do, rather than just tie myself up in knots of like, well, we haven't done this on this day, it's all fucked, what are we going to do, kind of thing. So that was a big change for me. But I think, that was the first year. Just trying to think. Because
you guys don't, I think you run separate businesses now, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, so what we have now, and it's funny, I was saying to Ian, actually, folks, before I joined the call, we were actually out, the three of us, last night, nothing to do with this call. It was Rob's 50th, which we didn't manage to get together for two in the summer. And they were taking the piss out of me. They said, oh, Ian's been hyping this up as well. He sounds like a soap opera, drama with this and that. And we were laughing about it because the point being, we've got to the point now, we were talking about, we've got a vacant property we own between us and we can't find anyone. And years ago, it would have been such a kind of big thing to talk about, and it was just an easy conversation, like, right, put that to bed, deal with the next thing. But I suppose what was the point I was going to make?
I like the fact they're all like in the way we promoted this as a soap opera.
Yeah, it was funny actually. There was a point at the end where it was that's not a story you guys need to know. But yeah, it was
we can pause the recording.
Your point was about who does what, right? So what we did, I think a couple of years ago now, and this was, I think, in part facilitated by you, Martin, with conversations with Ian, was that we took the decision. So at that point, I was running Found and Output as kind of MD across the two businesses. Ian was running Maze Theory, which is a game studio, and then Rob was working in Studio Output under me. And we took the decision at that point to kind of the next thing was to split Found and Output out as separate entities rather than essentially sat under one business. And what we also did at that point was kind of rebalance the shareholding. So rather than us all being equal shareholders in each business, the person running it had a greater shareholding. So a sense of, okay, well, if they're the one pushing it and making all the, making sort of big changes and big growth, then they're more remunerated from the others. And, that conversation, which could have been, it's the sort of thing you can imagine getting lawyers involved in and things like that. It took about 10 minutes to go, okay, what do you think? Yeah, this is my way I see it. And like, yeah, okay, that seems fair. So that in itself was a measure of how far we'd come, that we could get to something that we felt was fair. And so now, right now we get together socially and chat a bit about business and then just, kind of talk bollocks like people do at our age when they're sort of getting together. It's not we have a laugh about we're doing in certain businesses, certain things we'll kind of talk to each other about, but it's, we kind of realized that we wanted to see each other do well, but also the benefit of seeing each other do well at arm's length, but knowing that we were there for each other because of what we've been through. So yeah, that's where we are now. And
that's great. And Martin, one thing I'm getting from this is like the ability to have a conversation with your co-founders is sort of like a muscle that atrophies quite like over time. Would you say is that fair? Is that something to watch out for?
Yes, I think it's not that simple. I think mindset and what's going on in our minds. There's two things. There's the way that we're thinking, especially in today's world, right? It's very easy to get overwhelmed with worry or limiting your thinking about what your agency is capable of and so on, right? So my answer to your question earlier of Dan, one of them was they blew away their mindset of what was limiting them. And that's a fundamental thing, is to flush out what's between your ears so that you're free from limiting mindset about yourself or about your agency or about each other. That's point number one. And then point number two, what that enables is thinking differently, but it also enables then the communication, which on top of that is absolutely fundamental to really refine the art of communication. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I think the other thing I would say to that is there's working on that as a team, but the other thing that was critical that these guys did and that I would recommend any team do is, as well as the team process, we did one-to-one coaching. So each of them were working on their own stuff as well. And some of that stuff didn't affect the team. It was about them as leaders in the business. But some of it did affect the team. And so if Ian was working on certain ways of his style and how that was impacting others, if each of the individuals are working on their own stuff and improving how they're showing up, it also then has a massive impact on the team and how the team actually works.
Yeah, because I suppose that was sort of year 2 onwards, wasn't it? Was the monthly one-to-ones, and I think we would, I suppose you would act as a bit of a mediator or umbrella across some of those conversations as well, right? Where we needed to kind of join or kind of make bigger decisions. But yeah, I've forgotten about that part of it.
Yeah. How do you know? And by the way, if anyone has a question, just do feel free to chime in, but you don't have to if you don't want to. How do you know when it's time to get outside help? Like if you've got one co-founder, 2 co-founders, how do you know when it's time to get a coach, you think? What are some signs?
I don't know. I mean, I think for me, it was, like I say, it was having the experience of coaching, which actually the experience I had before we met Martin was completely different, but it was still different from anything I'd done before. And crucially, it was different from non-execs where, kind of some of the ones we had were just sort of prodding around and, being the kind of the grey hair in the room. I think the other thing, right, is, by that time we were all parents, and I think all of our roles had changed. I think because my role had changed probably a year before that to an MD role from a creative director role, I'd deliberately gone out and sort of met peers doing the same kind of roles and was reading. So I was on a bit of a voyage of education anyway. So I suppose my brain muscle had warmed up, if you like, to kind of go, well, I haven't got the answers, so I was looking for places to find them. And it just, it wasn't a point with like, Christ, we're desperate, we need a silver bullet, but maybe that was in the back of my mind. I mean, I can't remember, it was so long ago. And, I think we were in sort of, my son didn't sleep very well, so he was 1, so he was going through that kind of point as well. You're like, please help me.
Can I give an answer as well to that? Because I think
that one, Martin,
I'd love to, if I may. The thing that always for me is realize that your agency will only develop at the speed that your leaders do. So if you want to grow as an organization, then of course your leaders have to grow and your leadership team has to grow in how it works together. If not, at some point you're going to limit the growth of your agency. For me, that's just a no-brainer. It's like, and for me, the biggest impact on the success of the agency is the leaders, and that's their individual behaviors and their behaviors together. And so to answer your question also specifically, Ian, is like, how do you know? You know if there are issues that are having an impact on how the team works. If there's things that you can see aren't refined or aren't that good, you can see them having an impact in the team and the decisions you make and the way you are together. But also you can probably see that it's having an impact on the rest of the agency. And when you can see that, you go, we got to do something here.
Okay. Thanks, Martin. Sarah, what have you got to say?
Just got a question about so you went on this journey, you learned as leaders this. What did you then do across the agency to embody that through everybody else? Because it's only so good as, and you know, in my business and what I see, if the leaders are on board, that's absolutely fantastic, and that's half the battle. But then you've still got the same problems manifesting themselves in everybody else. If everybody else is bringing their own story to work, which happens, right? Because particularly in agency land, we've all learnt some pretty hard lessons along the way, particularly if you're from the clubbing era. Sorry, everybody else, but we are. And so I just wondered how you managed to sort of implement some changes that really effective across your business.
It's a really good question, Sarah, and I was actually thinking about that sort of segue myself, because I think some of what we did in that first year, Martin, and actually on subsequent things, were kind of techniques. You know, there's a couple of acronyms in particular I sort of remember of like communication things. So, you know, so the kind of it comes back, you know, not to sort of sound like a broken record, but it's communication. And I think what I found is that almost without trying, the more we did it, the better we became at communicating. And then that in itself becomes a trickle down, because you start to change the way you have meetings to be more effective, or to not do them, or to make them shorter, or whatever those things are. You know, we started to bring in different things in the business around how we were sharing achievements or progress or whatever, that kind of came out of the conversations we were having, and came out of the like, well, this feels like the right thing to do. And I think you I don't know whether you explicitly said this to us or not, Martin, but you know, what I've realized over time is that by going through a coaching process, you then pick up those skills, and then in time you kind of learn to coach people rather than manage people, and then that becomes more of the, I suppose, the culture of the business, giving people more of a voice, making the environment one where people's views are welcome, you know, all those sort of things that when you don't have it, you think, well, how do you make that happen? To your point, you know, you have to put one of these structures, but it kind of felt like over time, it sort of trickled down without the need to go, right, we are, and I'll give you an example of the other way. Years ago, Sarah, we had an HR professional. It was a lovely woman, and we did a lot of stuff around, it wasn't disc profiling, it was something like that. And then we did this session on, you know, how to create a kind of feedback culture. And I was just kind of, I was like, well, you know, whereas, you know, what I realize is that it's, to your point, it needs to kind of come from the top, but it needs to sort of be almost sort of percolated down through behavior, through like, oh, okay, I'm being asked lots of questions. That then becomes a habit that other people pick up, because actually, you know, leadership are open to, you know, we're asking for feedback and we're taking it on board, and we're going, do you know what, you had a good point there. Now we've made some changes. And it's kind of, and I think because it was like almost an organic process, not kind of like mine saying, right, by 6 months' time, you need to be this level of transparency or this or that. It's sort of happened over time. And yeah, and I think about how I communicate with people, and think about how I sort of let certain things go, which I just wouldn't have done before, because I was sort of caught up in a lot of sort of rigid structures that, you know, I sort of put in place naturally myself. I mean, it sounds a bit sort of, you know, wishy-washy, but it's, you know, that's my belief, is that, you know, over time of working this way, you then develop the ability to kind of, you know, think that way, and kind of, you know, let a lot of those things go, and go, well, you know, if you want to be transparent with things, then, or you want people, you know, if you want people to be a certain way, then the best way to start is to be that way yourself and show that you're authentic. And
wishy-washy, is it? I think the personal kind of things that we learn and the journey that we go on, and that cultural piece, you can't pin down. It's not like it's not something you can pin down. It's as much a feeling as it is about a kind of, as it's really difficult to explain, I think, with culture. Like that's my job, and I can't explain culture. If you said to me, give me an elevator pitch of culture, no, because it's a living, breathing thing, and because it comes down to your own individual perspectives and behaviors and how you manifest that then in your organization. So you can't put it down. It doesn't go in a spreadsheet down. It just doesn't go in a box, does it? No. And as for disc profiles, I have a blog on my website if you want to know more about that. I'll just leave that there now.
Well, I mean, we talked about that sort of stuff a lot, Martin, didn't we? And I think ultimately, when we were doing the early understanding of kind of how the mind works and thoughts and that, it made me realize, well, I can turn up as a different person in lots of different ways, and so what, right? It's kind of, I'm still not gonna know what the person I'm speaking to is thinking and why they're thinking that way. So, yeah.
One of the things I think is interesting about people who work with coaches, particularly really good ones like, if I may say so, Martin, is that you think you're going to meet them and they're going to give you like, eat this psychedelic toad and then you will go on a journey or something. But it actually, you end up picking up lots of subtle cues from them. Martin's spoken at our events before, and I always come away from meeting him like thinking, what would he do in this situation, and the way he sort of like reacts. And I think like you get a lot of, when you work with a coach, you absorb a lot of that stuff from them via osmosis.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Ian. I think it's exactly that. You absorb it. I think that's a good way of putting it. Because I think that particularly with the quality of mind sort of baseline, you develop a particular way of speaking about certain things, particular words you use and things like that. And I think that's, I never used to talk about reflecting on something. I use that a lot now because I'm doing it and I'm conscious of it. But I think it's all those things to your point, Sarah. If you're doing those and communicating that, then people are like, oh, you're speaking slightly differently, and now you're acting slightly differently. And then, as long as that's not upsetting people, they'll follow that if they think that's a good thing to do, and it goes back to culture. And you're right, he's sort of feeling, Sarah. I think that was a good way of putting it.
Is there anything? I know we've got 15 minutes left. Anything you think? Any territory you think we've not covered, or is there anything anyone would like to ask?
Could I just build on what Sarah and Dan have said there, is that for me, there's the left brain stuff. We're constantly trying to be rational, to measure things, to understand things by the disc profile, or we decide we want to do some team development, so we decide we need a goal that's specific and clear accountability and things like this. And the thing for me, what excites me, that I see where the power is in culture or in leadership or in team, is the invisible, undescribable, experiential element. And that's the bit where I think all the juice is the power of a team that works together is in the dynamic that is a moment by moment experience of it sort of unfolding and happening. It's a feeling of what's amazing, not a doing or a task at all.
And I think, and I was just thinking, then, Mark, what you were saying around. So, as I said before, a couple of years, up until 2 years ago, I was running two of our businesses, and 2 years ago, we made the decision to bring two women who worked for us for years, Johanna and Gemma, into the kind of board, if you like, to run output. And it felt like the right thing to do. And I think it felt like the right thing to do because of the journey we've been on. But we'd also, within probably a year before that, done a similar program with those guys within that business, done a 3-day retreat with those to kind of, and this end goal was not the point then. It was to kind of, get them I suppose, thinking, working the way we were. But again, I think it's given them the tools to, be able to do that, but also to be able to do it their way. I'm 2 years out of that business now, and it's doing far better than it ever was when I was in it, and I couldn't be happier because they're doing it their way. And me and Gemma speak every few weeks and swap ideas and learnings and things like that. And it's kind of, for me, it's great because well, this is what we wanted. We wanted these things not to die. We wanted them to kind of have arms and legs and sort of grow their own way. And I think that's part of what's made that happen as well.
That's amazing, Dan. That's a business you owned and ran for 20 years, and you own. I mean, I know Gemma's fantastic, and it's amazing that you only speak every few weeks, and you're not sort of crashing through the bricks every day like the Incredible Hulk.
You know what, Ian? It's a good point. So I kind of, we'd hatched this plan probably like this time of the year. Me and Robert hatched it sort of before lockdown, so 4 months before lockdown, and then that all went off, and we were still went into, and I think we kind of brought Gemma and Joe into this idea probably around May of lockdown, which is obviously not the best time to sell this kind of thing in. Mm-hmm. But it felt right for them, and I think there was like a sort of soft landing crossover between sort of July and September. And I think I said to Jem, look, the first thing you need to do is take me off, because we'd moved everything over to Google Workspace. And I said, look, don't let me see anything, because I will do exactly what you say. And I'll just be like, I spotted this, I spotted that. And, it's kind of like, you can't do this sort of thing if you don't trust people, right? If you're just going to have me hovering there, it's not good for me. It's not good for them. And he actually felt, I felt okay with that. And as time's gone on, we speak slightly less frequently because, it got to the point where, like, Jem, you don't need to report to me. This is for us to sort of share our experiences, and that's how it's going now, which is good.
Wow. I mean, what I've taken from this so far, I guess, is just the kind of the fact that big fundamental conversations are really hard to have unless you're able to step back and you have someone to guide you through it. And I'm also taking away the fact that it wasn't like what worked for you wasn't a sort of structured thing with like a particular methodology. It was someone who's using a lot of sort of, I want to say, in like invisible powers, who's done this before. And I think it's remarkable how you guys were together for like almost 20 years, and how you're even closer now and you're working really well. You're still friends, and I think this is really fascinating how it's gone. Any final things from you, Martin or Dan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a beautiful case study. I mean, we haven't actually focused on where they are now in terms of revenue and profit, but they've sold one business, they've got 3 that are way more successful than they were 5 years ago. So it's a testimony to them. Really, I guess this might then link into the last point, which is, how, as a leader and as a leadership team, how open are you to look at yourselves and to really go, well, I want to improve, I want to change, I want us to improve. And these guys were really great at that. It's like, to take the challenge and the exploration, because that's where transformation for me becomes possible.
And I think just to sort of riff on that final point, Martin, I think one of the things that we all realised early on in working with you is that, and this ties back to your point about structuring, is that there wasn't we hadn't got Martin in to go, right, Martin, get us in the shape where we can exit, where we can do this, where we can do that. There wasn't a brief, Martin, was there? Apart from like, we need some help. And I think that helped, because we weren't, and the way you work is not kind of goal orientated anyway, Martin, is it? I think maybe I've got the wrong language there, but do you know what I mean? It isn't sort of like, we need to get from A to B quicker, Martin can get us there quicker. It's like, it's hard to describe. But I think, the biggest thing I have now is that we don't get in each other's way. And we knew all along, even through the rough times, that we didn't want it to kind of end in fireworks and fall out and things like that, because we'd been through so much together. And even pre-Martin, when we were having some pretty bad conversations or just weren't getting on with that, well, we'd always, I think one of the things we'd always done as the three of us is one of us had dropped a big bollock, made a bad decision, we'd always stand by each other. And trust me, we've done some shockers. And I think that perhaps that was part of it as well. We wanted to sort of, we didn't want to just kind of walk away from each other, but at the same time, we were almost trapped by that thought as well. So, ultimately, it comes back to being able to kind of open yourselves up to each other.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing that. It's a remarkable level of maturity. That not every business has that, I think, and bravery to go through that. I don't use that word lightly, but to kind of turn over all those stones, it's not it's not an easy thing to do. And and Martin, if anyone's watching this or on the recording, or if you're here, and you want to work with Martin, he does come very highly recommended. Talking to Peter.
Can I just say something on that, Ian? It's funny, I feel really uncomfortable with this amazing amount of promotion of Martin here. I'm very grateful for it, of course, but and if anyone wants to talk, then great, I would gladly help them. But I just want to say the purpose of me being on this call really wasn't to self-promote. It was to share on a fascinating journey that Dan's been on, but also just to encourage you to think, whatever you do, whether it's with me or anybody else, just to encourage you to think about what is possible when you are individually and collectively transforming. That's, for me, the key point I'd love you to take away.
Brilliant. Listen, I hope that was useful, and I hope we delivered on some of the sort of soap opera style way we promoted this.
Rob and Ian are going to be very disappointed.
Cool. Thanks for attending, and I think Gavin, you're in an art gallery. You look like a painting yourself right now, but you're in a Basel art gallery.
I am actually in Kunstmuseum Basel, so yeah. I'm here for a networking thing that we're doing later on this evening. So I thought I'd just come along, but I really wanted to hear this session, and I'm really glad I did. Thanks for being so open, Dan. It's wonderful. Really great, really great story, and a positive one to take away.
Cool. We've got an interesting session on Tuesday as well about encouraging your SLT to step up. Like a lot of agencies sometimes think, we've got a good leadership team, but they're just not quite grabbing the steering wheel like I want. We've got something with Sally Henderson, leadership coach, at 2 p.m. on Tuesday that might be quite interesting. But yeah, thanks very much, Martin. Really appreciate it. Dan, thanks so much. And thanks everyone for taking part.
Did anyone have any questions, by the way? I know we've got a couple of minutes left. I mean, if you haven't, that's fine. I just didn't want to dull anyone if they did.
Rachel, did you have anything?
She's toying with it.
No, sorry. I was doing the same as Gavin and showing you that I am actually here. Sorry, I was just hiding with my camera off.
That's okay.
That was really interesting, and I've actually just emailed the leadership team I'm part of saying, we're not having any crises or anything like that, but I just think it sounds like a really good thing to do, full stop, and really eye-opening all round, and we've all worked together forever, so I think an outside perspective would be really refreshing. So yeah, I'm feeling inspired. I just need to find some budget for this kind of thing now.
Good.
I'm glad you found it good. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Cool. Brilliant. If anyone wants, if anyone does have any questions afterwards, we can feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn or something as well if there's specific things. But yeah, nice to see you all again. Thanks.
Cool. Cheers, folks. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Martin. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.